You were a reporter for the New York Times and did distinguished work there, and yet you left the New York Times in 1979,
Right.
I was reading in your resume, and for the last almost 30 years you've been a freelance journalist. Is that a lifestyle that you prefer? And why?
No, particularly now, I wouldn't recommend it to anybody because it's dicey. You know, the economy's, you know, in the toilet, as they say, to put it mildly. And so, no. I like to write books, and I wrote a bunch of movies in the 80s. I did all sorts of different stuff. It's fun to do different things. And I had been sort of the great avenger for the New York Times, going after, on the Vietnam War and on Bush and organized crime stuff. You know, I have to tell you something. I've been a reporter for about 45 years.
And you started as a police reporter.
I was a police reporter in Chicago. I saw a lot of stiffs in my life, a lot of dead bodies. Anyway, and a lot of corruption.
Some are still alive, actually.
Well, but you know, in all those years, writing about organized crime, writing about mass murder and My Lai, the My massacre, writing about Abu Ghraib, the prison stuff, and all the wrongdoing that goes on. In 45 years, I've never met anybody who thought he did anything wrong. You have to understand that. That's one of the great things. Yeah, absolutely. One of the great things about a human life, human beings.
Really, they all have a
we can
rationale.
Absolutely.
Wow.
So it's sort of, and so anyway, it just was, in my case, like I felt that way after being in the newspaper business for a long time. I started as I say, a police reporter, worked for the Wires, Associated Press. So I did my apprenticeship. I feel the same way. I felt the same way then as I feel now about, I've been doing 9/11 since 9/11. No other story. I've got one or two more to do for the New Yorker. If the election turns out the way the poll says it will, and if he gets through the inauguration, I think I'm just going to go off and do something totally different. You know, I wish I were a good enough golfer. I'd be a pro golfer. Just to get out of it. You know, changing is always good.
Change is good. Well, what about the election? Do you have a comment about what we're watching?
It doesn't matter what I think. I mean,
Yeah.
I have my, obviously, are you kidding? I mean,
Yeah.
Is there any doubt where I am? I mean, I think Bush is the single worst president we've ever had. And I've been saying for years, I'm not saying this as it's a form of braggadocio, I was saying there's no way you can spend the money we're spending. They claim $120 billion a year in Iraq. It's a lot more than that, I believe.
Yeah.
And plus the money in Afghanistan. There's no way you can spend that kind of money without dealing with the tax structure.
Are we safer today, do you think?
Oh, no. Oh, my God, these guys have put us in much more jeopardy. Do you know we lost 58,000 American boys, and men and women, mostly men, in the Vietnam War. And that was a disaster, but it was always tactical. Here we've had a war in which we've lost, I mean, I'll never use the word only. There's no such thing as only one death. We've lost 4,500. 4,500. We're in that middle range now, 4,000 to 5,000. And so the losses are what, 7, 8, 9% of what we had then. And yet this is a strategic war. This is not tactical. This is not some sort of a mistake we made. And then 5 years after the Vietnam War ends, we're playing Monopoly in Vietnam, building hotels and doing travel, and the Vietnamese love us and we love them.
Well, like Germany and Japan, we rebuild our enemies.
In Japan's case, it was amazing. Once we decided we could keep the emperor, the Japanese people turned around and they were acquiescent. It was more complicated in Europe. The point I'm making is that we have dug a hole for ourselves with the Muslim world that is really going to be complicated, going to take a long time to dig out of. This is not going to be a turnaround like we had even.
And it's more than military. It's public relations. It's perception. It's religious. It's theoretical. It's
they think we're their enemy.
Yeah.
I mean, and you can't have that, and we're not their enemy. And that's why I think electing somebody whose father was Muslim and who's perceived by most people, he's black. He says he's black, and he claims to be a black person, even though he's a white mother. So that perception is going to be very, very important for us around the world.
Let's talk about the Middle East for a second. You wrote a lead story for the New Yorker magazine in February about the Israeli attack on Syria that surprisingly got very little attention, but you had some interesting insights in that article.
I raised questions about it. I said, I'm not sure there was a nuclear reactor. I'm personally totally convinced on the basis of what people inside tell me, but there's a lot of difference between what somebody inside tells me and somebody is willing to say in some sort of official way. I can tell you right now, as sure as I'm sitting here, there was no nuclear reactor. The Israelis may have indeed, there was a serious weapons plant there, which is one reason why the Syrians were so reluctant to talk publicly about it. They were building missiles there. You know, it turns out the way to get to Israel, a nuclear weapon does no good for anybody. What is a nuclear weapon going to do for you? How are you going to use it? And particularly, is Syria going to develop a nuclear bomb or 2 bombs? The same question for Iran, and use it against Israel when Israel is 400 and you're annihilated? It's a useless weapon. What the Syrians learned in the 2006 war in Lebanon, if you remember, Israel invaded Lebanon and got beat back by the Hezbollah, the Party of God. And what they learned is asymmetrical warfare, that you can throw a lot of rockets into northern Israel and accomplish a lot more than you can by having a strategic weapon. And so that's what they were doing, building rockets.
Okay, we'll be continuing this fascinating discussion with Sy Hersh after we pause for these messages. Welcome back. We're continuing a discussion with Sy Hersh, this year's distinguished speaker here at Long Beach State. Sy, another cover story you wrote at the New Yorker this year about Bush military plans to possibly attack Iran with nuclear weapons. Give us a sense of your thinking on that.
Well, look, I think I'm wrong. I don't think it's going to happen. By the way, I never said they would. I just said they wanted to. But for 3 years now, I've been basically been a Johnny One Note. You know, Chicken Little, the sky is falling, the sky is falling. Because inside the White House, I do know this. It's almost, the string is almost out now on this administration. But obviously, I have people who are inside the White House, inside Dick Cheney's office. People talk to me, people who know what's going on. And for years, both Bush and Cheney have been absolutely convinced that Iran's the existential enemy, just like the Israelis believe that, and that we cannot tolerate a nuclear-armed Iran. And no matter what the intelligence community says, and if you remember, about a year ago, last December, there was a national intelligence estimate put out by the community as a whole, studied to death and very nervously, that said no evidence that Iran is weaponized. Yes, they may be enriching uranium, but they haven't done anything to make a weapon since '03, 5 years ago. Pretty amazing, definitive statement. Cheney and Bush's position internally on that is, we don't buy it. We know that they're going to get a bomb, and we know if they get a bomb, they're going to get somebody like Hezbollah, the Party of God in northern Lebanon, the jihadist group, the Shia group there, one time major terrorist group, but now Hezbollah is working internally inside the government of Lebanon. But at one point, they were certainly very tough customers. And Cheney and Bush believe that basically that we're just a week or a day away from a bomb in America.
But you know the old saying, one nuclear bomb can ruin your whole day, and with miniature nuclear devices and backpacks and all. There was a wonderful movie that game planned that. Isn't that a real existential threat to the United States, that a terrorist group without a home address can get a hold of one of these things and ignite one in an American city?
Absolutely. It just doesn't happen to be Iran. That's all. I mean, I think the more likely the most likely scenario of a bomb coming that way would be from Pakistan. Yeah. The Pakistanis have been making bombs, we know, since the 80s. And not only that, we also know, definitively know, that they've miniaturized. Wow. You know, making a bomb, enriching the material is hard enough. Actually fabricating a warhead and doing you have to make a small little compact warhead. Right. You have to have thousands of explosives around it. You get a reaction by crushing it all at once, the nanoseconds. You got to hit the right time. Really complicated. And so the Pacs are the more likely people, I would think, that if you're going to have a loose bomb.
You've been pretty tough on the Bush administration.
I'd say that's understatement.
But let me just play devil's advocate here. Everyone after 9/11 thought it would be inevitable to have another major attack, and yet we haven't had it. And many people ask, how come?
What happened is if you really go and start talking to people, you know, as I'm long of tooth, I've been around doing national security stuff for a long time. There was a total, complete panic in the beginning that was totally explicable. You could understand it. You could understand why the day after 9/11, they decided they were going to start wiring up people in the United States, beginning to eavesdrop, in a violation of the Constitution and the law, because they were in a panic. They thought they were getting reports that Chicago may go down, that there were cells, that this was a terrorist cell that had been obviously operating certainly in the East Coast for months without being detected.
And we are vulnerable because we're an open society, and there are chemical plants, there are pipelines, there are all kinds of targets. There are ports right here in Long Beach.